In the heart of England's Industrial Revolution, there was a sound that no one truly understood. It wasn't the rhythmic clatter of looms or the hiss of steam that filled the air of the factory towns. No, it was a sound that struck terror into the hearts of those who heard it. A sudden, almost unnatural silence followed by an explosion so fierce it could tear apart the very foundations of a building. Imagine it, a moment frozen in time. A factory filled with the hum of machinery suddenly falling still. Then, a crack, a thunderous boom. The air fills with fragments of iron, metal tearing through stone, destroying everything in its path. This was the sound of the flywheels, the very giants that powered the factories, turning against their makers. The sound of destruction, the sound of lives lost in an instant, as cast iron, sometimes weighing as much as 80 tons, would burst apart, sending shards crashing through brick walls and streets, leaving death in its wake. It was the great, unspoken danger of Britain's industrial age. These were the machines that fueled an empire, but they also claimed lives, often unnoticed, uncounted, and most tragically, unremembered. The story begins with James Watt, the inventor who would unknowingly spark an industrial revolution that would forever change the world. In 1788, Watt, a humble Scottish instrument maker, made a seemingly simple addition to the steam engine, a flywheel. At first glance, it seemed like an elegant solution. This massive wheel of cast iron mounted on the engine's main shaft would store kinetic energy, allowing the steam engine to deliver smoother, more consistent power. When the piston pushed, the flywheel absorbed the force. When the piston paused, the wheel's momentum kept the machines running. This simple yet brilliant idea led to the creation of machines that could power factories across the land, from the bustling mills of Manchester to the ironworks of Sheffield. By the early 1800s, machines using flywheels were producing thousands of horsepower, their spinning wheels providing the energy needed to keep the cotton mills running, to keep the factory towns alive. But those same flywheels, which had become the heartbeats of the industry, were also the greatest threat the workers faced. No one could have predicted that the very machines that made the empire strong could be the ones to tear it apart. As industry thrived, so did the size of the machines. The flywheels became bigger, more powerful, and more dangerous. By the 1870s, in the cotton mills of Lancashire, engines were producing up to 1,000 horsepower, driving flywheels up to 26 feet in diameter. They spun at speeds that made the air around them hum with an almost unnatural power. The wheels themselves weighed more than 50 tons, and their energy was so immense that if they were to burst, they could bring down entire buildings. And burst they did. No one knew when, no one knew why, but the machines would sometimes fail in an instant, throwing fragments of cast iron like cannonballs. It wasn't a slow crack or a bend, it was a violent explosion that shattered everything in its path. One moment the factory would hum with activity, and the next it would be a scene of chaos, with the aftermath of a devastating tragedy. Workers knew the dangers. The rumors were whispered in dark corners of the mills, in the shadow of the giant machines. The flywheels are hungry, they would say, hungry for destruction. The noise was a warning. Those who had heard it knew it was too late. It was already happening. The machines weren't just dangerous because of their size and power. They were dangerous because of their unpredictable nature. Engineers had created mechanisms to try to control these beasts, to keep them from running out of control. The most famous of these was the centrifugal governor, a mechanical contraption designed to regulate steam flow, to ensure the machines never spun too fast. But, like many attempts to tame the beast of industrial power, the governor failed. Oil dried, parts wore out, and adjustments were made incorrectly. And when something went wrong, when a machine suddenly lost its load, when a belt snapped or a loom stopped spinning, the governor couldn't save the factory from catastrophe. One morning, In August 1896, in a cotton mill in the industrial town of M, the unthinkable happened. As the workers were toiling at their looms, they noticed something wrong. The shafting above their heads began turning faster than it should. Belts were flying off pulleys, and before anyone could act, two deafening crashes shook the building to its core. The smaller of the mill's two engines, a 16-foot flywheel, exploded. The massive wheel, traveling at incredible speed, fractured into pieces, sending deadly fragments crashing through the building. One of the chunks of iron nearly hit a nearby hotel. Another crashed through the mill's engine house, reducing it to rubble. By some miracle, no one died, but it was a close call. Had the accident happened at a different time, when children were on their way home from school, when the streets were full of people, the outcome would have been much different. The tragedy at M's mill was not an isolated incident. The flywheel explosions were so common in the mills of Victorian Britain that engineers developed certain rules of thumb to predict when the machines were in danger of exploding. These rules stated that the flywheels should not exceed a certain speed, and that the cast iron used to make them should be of the highest quality. But these rules didn't always work, and many accidents went unreported, their victims left unnamed, their families left in silence. It wasn't just the workers who suffered. Entire communities lived in the shadow of these machines, aware of the constant threat they posed. The mills were the lifeblood of the towns, places where people went to work to earn their living, but also where they could lose their lives in the blink of an eye. For many families, the explosion of a flywheel wasn't just a tragedy. It was part of the landscape, a grim reality that workers had come to accept as the price of progress. The workers would be replaced, the machines would be repaired, and life would go on. But for the families of the dead, the story ended there. No one recorded their names, no one wrote their stories. They were lost to history. As the 20th century dawned, the great machines that had powered the Industrial Revolution began to lose their relevance. Electric motors were replacing the giant steam engines, and the age of the flywheel was coming to an end. By the 1920s, the massive machines that had once powered entire towns were no longer necessary. The factories no longer needed flywheels to turn their wheels, and the spinning giants fell silent. Today, only a handful of these machines remain, preserved as museum pieces, relics of a bygone era. The great flywheels that once powered the mills of Britain now stand still, their once thunderous roar replaced by silence. Some of them are still occasionally steamed up for visitors to see, a testament to an industrial heritage that built a world but left a trail of forgotten lives in its wake. The workers who lived and died in the shadow of these great machines are all but forgotten. The children, the weavers, the engineers, the overseers, they all played a part in the machinery of Britain's rise to greatness. But their lives were often overlooked. The stories of their deaths, the explosions that took their lives, the injuries they suffered, these are the stories that were lost to time. But perhaps they shouldn't be forgotten. Perhaps their sacrifices deserve to be remembered, not just as a footnote in the history of industry, but as a reminder of the human cost of progress. These workers, these families, they were the ones who built the empire. And yet, their stories were erased by the very machinery they helped create. So, if you have a memory of those mill towns, a story passed down through the generations, a tale of the giants that once roared through the heart of Britain, don't let it fade away. Share it. Remember those who died not for fame or glory, but simply for the work they did, for the machines that turned their lives into dust. As you read these words, take a moment to reflect on the lives that built the world around us. The workers who lived and died in the shadow of the spinning giants are no longer with us, but their legacy lives on. The mills have gone silent. The engines have stopped spinning. But the stories of those who worked and died in their shadows deserve to be remembered. If you've ever worked in a factory, walked the streets of a mill town, or heard the stories passed down through the generations, take a moment to think about those who came before us. Their work, their lives, their struggles, these are the stories that built our world. And maybe, just maybe, we owe them more than just a passing thought. Maybe it's time to tell their stories, time to remember the spinning giants and the lives they claimed, time to honor the forgotten heroes of the Industrial Revolution. If you have a memory, a story, or a connection to the mills, the factories, or the workers who lived and died in the shadow of these giants, share it with us. Let us remember the lives that built the world we live in today. Let's ensure their sacrifices are not lost to time. Share their stories. Relive your cherished memories. Watch our video now and take a journey down memory lane. Don't miss out. Like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected and be a part of this nostalgic experience.